There's a new program in the works that would grant second citizenship to folks with actual investments, not donations of as little as $100,000. And today I'm going to lay out what one country is doing to offer citizenship in a very unique way. So the small nation of Armenia has for years been the discussion of a potential citizenship by investment program. Years ago, somebody suggested they offer citizenship by investment, a formalized program where people make a donation. In this case, it was suggested $50,000 and to grant people citizenship. The idea that Armenia does not have visa-free access to Europe, but is working on getting it. Angela Merkel suggested they should be fast-tracked to get it when she was in power. They did not want to ruffle feathers of folks in Europe by going out and offering citizenship by investment, which our definition is a standardized offering. It's available to pretty much anybody. So it could be Russians, it could be Chinese, it could be Iranians next door. They did not think that would gel well with their chances of Europe. And Armenia generally has not liked to grant citizenship to folks who simply come and invest money. We've seen people who've gone and started large companies. They really don't want to do it. They don't want to get in the crosshairs of Europe. And so we're not talking in this case about citizenship by descent. Armenians who are baptized in an Armenian church, who have Armenian ancestors, you can go and get citizenship by descent. We've done that for folks. It's relatively straightforward, and it's definitely something that you should do. But if you don't have an Armenian ancestor and you'd like to get this very uncorrelated citizenship, they're now talking about rolling out a less formal way of granting folks citizenship in an expedited basis. If it's your first time here, I'm Andrew Henderson, founder of Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally reduce your taxes, protect your assets, increase your freedom, and grow your opportunities around the world. And that includes having a second citizenship. What I like about Armenia's citizenship is you can go to Russia, you can go to China, probably not the most popular places right now. You can go to Iran. Perhaps going to give you difficulties in traveling to places like the United States if you do that, but you can. It is not a great passport in terms of its travel quality right now. We would call it a T or C, so no access to the US, no access to Europe. You do have access to a number of South American countries, Asian countries. There are special benefits that all the former USSR countries get, for example, like being able to go through Singapore and spend a few days there. So it's not a top travel document, but if you already have a good travel document, let's say the US or the UK, being Armenian gives you something that's very different. Certainly they have moved westward in recent years, is the fact that they were trying to get, as Georgia did in 2017, visa-free access to Europe's Schengen area. That has been delayed due to COVID and other factors. They still have a good relationship with Russia. And so this all leads to a passport that is not different. It is a certain level of diversification if you have a Western passport. You can get residence in Armenia. Again, you can get citizenship by descent in Armenia. The country, certainly if you were to live there and learn Armenian, would give you citizenship. But for folks who don't want to live there, for folks who don't want to change their lifestyle, they're now talking about basically taking advantage of the fact that they have, as a number of countries do, the ability to grant citizenship through an exceptional procedure at the presidential or the prime minister level. Again, this has not always worked in Armenia, and so it'll be interesting to see if this actually works this time. If what they're trying to do is basically have a citizenship by investment program, it appears, where they lay out specific criteria, which I'll share with you, for how you can get Armenian citizenship without actually putting it into law. So a country like in the Caribbean is going to rewrite its law to have a Citizenship by Investment Act and to include everything in there. And it's very specific, and it'll say things like if someone's been rejected for a visa from a country we've got a visa-free travel agreement with, they must be rejected. That's just in the law. The Citizenship by Investment Act is right in the law. That's the basis. The basis in many countries, like you'll see Austria, for example. Some people talk about how they have a citizenship program. They don't have a program, but if you do something that catches their attention, they will at times grant you citizenship. Maybe it's 5 a year, maybe it's 20 a year. Number of different countries have this power. So it is above board, but it's much more opaque. And so Armenia is trying to use that part of its law to grant citizenship to exceptional investors, exceptional scholars, exceptional what have you, while actually laying out some specific criteria. Here's what it is. If you were to contribute $150,000 to a foundation to carry out activities in education or science, they would say, hey, you're an exceptional scientist or an exceptional educator, more or less, and grant you citizenship. So that appears to be a donation. If you want to make an investment, however, which would differ from what most people are doing in, let's say, Caribbean countries, where the standard practice, the best practice for most folks is just to make a donation. $100,000, $130,000, that money's gone, you get a passport. Better quality passport than Armenia has today. Their passport could grow. But what they're talking about is, all right, we'll solve your donation problem by saying, how about you invest $150,000 in the shares of a commercial entity for no less than 10 years? Now, that's a long hold time. Turkey next door has a 3-year hold time on property or bank deposits, for example. But if you wanted to put 150 grand into some kind of business for 10 years, that would do it. $150,000 in government bonds for no fewer than 7 years. Obviously, bonds have fallen out of favor this year. Armenian bonds always paid higher rates. The currency is one of the better performing currencies. So you missed out on about 20% of currency appreciation against the US dollar. How many countries can say that in the last year? You missed out on that. Will it appreciate further? Nobody can say, of course. But interest rates were always quite high. You could make 7, 8, 9% on government bonds, and you could buy those on the secondary market through a bank in Armenia. By the way, you generally need a residence permit to get a bank account in Armenia now. That's the process. How about $150,000 in real estate based on the cadastral value? So basically they're saying, hey, you can't just spend 150. We need to actually make sure it's appraised at 150. Hold that for 10 years. An investment in a government-approved investment fund of 150 for no fewer than 10 years. So basically their investment level is $150,000. Hold it for 7 to 10 years, whether it's bonds, real estate, investing in companies, or investing in a fund. By the way, the government will have to set up approval process for these funds. This generally happens when you see new programs of this nature rolled out where, hey, you can invest in real estate, and then there's no real estate options, and they have to slowly roll out the first one. If you establish a company in a high-tech or IT business with a capitalization of at least $1 million, provided that the center of vital interest of the founder is located in Armenia. So this is where you're going to get into the tax net in Armenia. They have a lot of tax incentives for small business owners. Once you start to make more money, at the point where you're investing $1 million, you're going to have a moderate, tax basis. So if you're willing to pay tax and start an IT company, that can be interesting. Armenia has really been pushing to be the Silicon Valley of the region. They have a lot of IT companies going there. If you're looking for IT workers, we know folks who are moving to Armenia from even India because it is more affordable to hire folks there. And so if you want a very affordable place to start an IT back office and you're willing to put in some time in Armenia, have $1 million company, that could be a way to do it. Obviously more of a lifestyle adjustment. Okay, then there's a few that get ridiculous. If you have a branch for a foreign IT company that has a $100 million market capitalization, or has more than 500 employees in Armenia. So that's getting a little crazy. But again, if you're Google and you want to open up a branch in Armenia, I guess they probably already have one, then you can get citizenship for your foreign IT company. Establishing a VC fund, venture capital fund with $80 million or more. So that's getting a little crazy. Back to normality, $100,000 in a high-tech or VC fund. They really want to bring IT people to Armenia. Or in which, potentially even with no investment, if you have 20 years of work experience in IT companies and you have work experience and you've, for a company that's traded on the New York Stock Exchange, if you've got 20 years of work experience, again, at a big fancy company traded publicly in Western markets, you may not even have to invest at all. Lastly, you can invest in the postal sector, $250,000. So lots of different options there. None of this has been finalized yet, but they are likely to use the existing infrastructure of just, again, granting people citizenship by the signature of the president, but setting out criteria. The question in these situations is, what's the enforcement mechanism for making sure if you invest $150,000 in real estate that you're actually going to get your citizenship? And what's the mechanism of how they're going to force you to hold it for 10 years? Because what you see generally in an exceptional citizenship situation is once it's granted, there is really no more requirement. So what Turkey, for example, will do is they'll put a title deed restriction on your property to where you can't sell it for 3 years. You also can't sell it to someone else. The next person can't qualify for citizenship by investment as well. But they're basically making it to where the property just can't be sold because you can't really give back the citizenship. I'll renounce my citizenship to sell my property to free up liquidity because I don't want the property anymore. No. How is Armenia going to handle that in an exceptional procedure? That will need to be seen. So this is very interesting. I think people should be looking at citizenships of countries like Armenia that are uncorrelated. Certainly if you have a T or C passport, if you're Indian, if you are Chinese, this may not be as valuable unless you want to be able to renounce your Chinese citizenship, go back to China as a foreigner without a visa. Maybe then it's valuable. But for most folks, this is a play for someone who has, in my opinion, a good passport, a T or A passport, or a T or B passport. If you paired this with, let's say, a Caribbean citizenship by investment in something like St. Lucia, this would be a nice combination. By the way, even though St. Lucia is the worst in terms of visa-free travel of all 5 Caribbean passports, I already had other passports, which is why it shows St. Lucia. Sometimes when you put 2 together, you can save money on the first one. You can get more diversification. So I was able to get St. Lucia, which has access to Central America, which I didn't fully have because I already had other parts covered. So the bottom line is if you have a good passport, something like Armenia could be a good mix. I tell everybody who's ethnically Armenian that they should get their Armenian citizenship by descent, but if you're not, this could be an interesting way to buy a property. Property in Armenia, because of the diaspora, does have constant demand if you're buying in the right places. You saw during the height of the war in 2020, property prices dipped a little bit, and then they continually kind of went back up. Same thing you saw in Georgia when they had the war in 2008. Property prices on a steady increase, temporarily dipped, paused, came right back up. And so if you are in the IT sector, this could be interesting. If you want an uncorrelated passport, this could be interesting. I want to see how the details of this are worked out. But this is the kind of passport that I would be looking at as part of my portfolio. I think it could be very interesting.